Hello everybody, welcome to this year's Halloween special. As always, I am your host, Mr.G. Today, viewer, beware, you are in for a scare. Ha 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 ha! 'Cause today, we're talking about the long-running children's book series, Goosebumps. Written by R.L. Stine, Goosebumps is a series that's been running since the early 90s, and it shows no sign of stopping anytime soon. It had a popular TV show, it had 2 movies, and lots of books. But what is a horror story without monsters? Well, it'd be a slasher story. But, I'm getting off topic. In this special episode of Monsters of the Mind, we'll be looking at some of the monsters created by the Goosebumps series. So, let's get started. But, like always, let's go over some of the rules. Number 1, I have the same rules as my regular videos: no superpowered humans, no parodies, and no animals. Number 2, I will only be discussing monsters who are antagonistic. Number 3, I decided not to do ghosts or witches because they're literally just superpowered humans, and ghosts because, to be honest, I don't really consider ghosts to be like monsters. And number 4, I'm only doing the original series. That might sound lame to you considering how many books there are, but I still have over 60 books to work with. If you guys want it, maybe I'll do the other series someday. Yeah. Well, enough dilly-dally. Let's get into this, starting with book number 1. Our first book, Welcome to Dead House, brings us to the quaint little town of Dark Falls. It's a peaceful town full of lovely neighbors, who just so happen to be zombies. After a chemical leak happened, they are now, stuck in this form, and they have to sacrifice one person a year in order to keep on existing. Luckily, though, these zombies follow Minecraft rules, and as such, they are weak to light, and being exposed to it will end their curse. Stay out of the basement, Dr. Brewer tells his children, a brilliant mind working on the ultimate plant. Unfortunately, things go horribly wrong when his own blood gets added to the mixture, creating an identical clone that traps him and proceeds to take over his life. Luckily for him, though, the clone committed the biggest mistake an imposter can do, failing to do his homework. So the plant clone is killed and everyone lives happily ever after. Except for all the plants who also claim to be Brewer, but that's life. At first, monster blood just seemed like a regular blob of play slime. It stretched, glue in the dark, and bounced. But the longer it's out of its can, the bigger and hungrier the slime gets. In addition, anyone who eats the blood will end up growing in size. From giant dogs to hamsters the size of gorillas, monster blood is a very dangerous substance. Luckily, though, it has an expiration date. But the blood just won't die, and has appeared in many of the books. So this blood is... what's a good pun for blood not going away? This blood keeps circulating. Oh, that was terrible. Now, we're gonna skip the next 2 books. Say Cheese and Die features a cursed camera, but it doesn't really show any signs of sapience, so it doesn't really qualify as a monster. And Curse of the Mummy, it does feature mummies, but they only appear at the end to defeat the main bad guy, who's a human cult leader. So again, this book doesn't qualify. In Let's Get Invisible, we deal with a mirror that when exposed to light will cause whoever is in front of it to, well, become invisible. And when the lights go out, you become visible again. However, there's a drawback. If you stay invisible too long, then your reflection will become real, and you become trapped in the mirror. But don't worry, if the mirror is broken, the reflections will be defeated, and the real humans will return. Mostly. If you notice your friend is using the wrong hand, good luck. You have to be a dummy to not like dummies. Well, except for this one. This one's kind of forgivable. In Night of the Living Dummy, an amateur puppeteer gets jealous of her sister's dummy making her popular, so she decides to get her own dummy to spite her. But weird things start happening after reading a strange set of words. The dummy seems to move and talk on its own, it spits horrible slime on people, and it starts to physically assault them. In addition, the dummy proves unkillable and escapes any place it's trapped in. However, eventually, the foolish puppet eventually meets his end after a steamroller compresses him to dust. And thus ends the short-lived reign of the dummy who we all know and love as Mr. Wood. Oh yeah, there's also another dummy in this book that they find out is alive at the end. I think his name is Skippy, or Slippy, or Jiffy, or something. It's lost on me at the moment. Girl Who Cried Monster is a tale of a chronic liar who always makes up stories of monsters. However, this habit comes back to bite her hard after she witnesses the librarian turning into a strange creature that eats flies and turtles, as well as basically any other small creature. Because of her chronic lying, nobody believes her. Well, except for the librarian himself, who tries everything he can to silence her. But unfortunately for the monster librarian, he gets invited over for dinner at her house. It turns out that he's actually the main course, as it turns out the girl's family are also monsters, who do not want any other of their kind in town. Alright, the next book is Welcome to Camp Nightmare, but this one's kind of weird because the monster in it doesn't actually exist. And then at the end it reveals all the characters are aliens who may or may not be planning to conquer the Earth, but they don't actually go through with it in the book, so they don't really count. Forget it, let's just move on. Following that is Ghost Next Door, which deals with the possibility of a ghostly neighbor, but as I said at the beginning, this video is not about ghosts, so we're skipping this and moving on to the next book. Halloween, the day where thousands go out in costumes in order to get candy. But do be careful when choosing your costume, lest you become the next victim of the haunted mask. A seemingly normal latex mask that, when placed on, will slowly transform you into a more permanent host, becoming harder and harder to remove every time you place it over your head. Luckily though, this mask is weak to the power of love. Just make sure your brother doesn't get his hands on it. Now before I continue, I should probably explain why I'm doing the haunted mask, but not other cursed objects. Well, you see, in the book, it's very much implied the haunted mask is alive and has its own goals, so therefore, it technically counts. So, yeah. Following tales of a wish-granting witch and a murderous piano teacher, we come to Fever Swamp, Florida, where strange maulings have been plaguing the area, where rabbits and other animals have been found with distinctly canine-like attack marks. In addition, strange howling noises are heard at night. A local reports claim sightings of a bipedal wolf. After many false leads, like a dog and an old hermit, it eventually turns out the werewolf is actually a local boy, William Blake, who meets his end after getting knocked into Hollywood-style quicksand. You know, the kind where you just get sucked in rather than slowly sink through, like in real life? Yeah, that kind. Unfortunately, Will passed his curse on to his friend. But he doesn't really mind, since now he and his dog can form a hunting pack. Yay! You can't scare me, claims class show-off Courtney King, a girl who is nearly impossible to scare. In order to find something she's afraid of, several of her classmates seek out a local legend about people who were killed and buried by a flood, who are now said to rise once a year in order to seek revenge. However, it turns out the monsters are very real, and end up scaring the kids off. Yeah, unfortunately the mud monsters don't actually really do anything in this book, so, moving on. For our next venture, we go to the theme park Horrorland. It has great rates for a theme park. It's certainly a lot cheaper than Disneyland, and it's a lovely place full of rides, such as a lazy river, where you're enclosed in a coffin while spiders crawl over you, mirror halls where the walls close in, oh, and of course a slide where you could potentially get trapped forever. And all of this is managed by a group of monsters known as the Horrors. Strange green creatures resembling stereotypical demons, but without wings, the Horrors trap people in Horrorland in order to torture them for their own amusement. Luckily though, they're weak to pinching. Causes them to inflate like a balloon, you know. So, yeah, not the sturdiest of monsters, are they? Oh well. Following 3 stories with bee brain swapping, monster blood mutating a hamster, and a book about pirates trying to illegally sell mermaids, that also features a cover that has been burned into my brain for the past however many years. I seriously love this cover so much. I know I'm getting off topic, and this book I just said doesn't qualify, but oh man, do I love this cover so much. I think it works for the same reasons the Jaws poster works so much, in that it perfectly captures why so many people are afraid of the ocean, because you can just be there swimming all calm and happy, but underneath, there could be a predator about to strike and rip you piece by piece. Shame this is only a single scene in the book, though. Way to false advertise. Anyway, our next book brings us down to the farm, where siblings Jody and Mark visit their grandparents, where they have an unusually large amount of scarecrows. And by that I mean they have more than one scarecrow. As time goes on, it's clear that the scarecrows are moving on their own, and seem to be out for blood. Eventually, it turns out the scarecrows are brought to life by the farmhand who used them to threaten the grandparents to make them only do what he wants to do. Luckily, though, the scarecrows are burned to death because, despite being alive, they're still just straw. Now, after Scarecrow, Goosebumps went on a bit of a monster hiatus. Instead, it gave us books about vengeful worms, ghost beaches, another story that promises evil mummies, even though evil mummies aren't a thing that appears in the book, the dollar store version of the Phantom of the Opera, shape-shifting supervillains, anamorphing kids, time-traveling executioners, time-traveling cuckoo clocks, and a third dose of monster blood. We finally get another viable monster story with It Came From Beneath the Sink. In this story, a girl named Kat has just moved into a new house. However, underneath the sink, there's a strange sponge-like creature known as a gruel, a being that feeds on misery and causes bad luck to whoever its victim is. And to add insult to injury, it's indestructible, and if you try to give it away, you'll die in a day. But our protagonist realizes that if this is a creature of negativity, then that must mean it hates love, which turns out to be true. She acts kind to the gruel, and it shrivels into nothingness. Unfortunately, shortly afterwards, she comes across a close relative of the gruel known as the Lynx, a vampiric potato that sucks you dry of your energy until you die. The end. In Night of the Living Dummy 2, the other dummy from the ending of the first book, whose name I still can't quite remember, I think it's Happy or Clappy, whatever. Anyways, this time, he's the main bad guy. After getting purchased by a different young girl, she finds a slip of paper in his pocket containing a string of words that, when read aloud, bring him to life. After this, the dummy slowly isolates the girl from her family, causing him to think she's going insane. He insults people, bites them, wrecks their rooms, all while making it seem like it was the girl who did it. You know, a kid's story. Fortunately, though, the dummy meets his end after the girl's old dummy is revealed to also be alive, and he bashes the evil dummy's head in. Hopefully that's the last we see of Mr. whatever his name is dummy. After a story about ghost dogs, we take a getaway to the illustrious Camp Jelly Jam Sports Camp, perfect for children who love sports. But something's not right at this camp. The counselors seem off, and they have a weird obsession with winning, plus there's odd tremors at night. This is because the camp is actually ruled by the evil King Jelly Jam, a purple blob who oozes snails, who hypnotized a bunch of adults as camp counselors, and whose belches are so powerful they create earthquakes. Turns out the top campers are sent to the king in order to groom him, and if they refuse, he eats them. However, after all the kids stand their ground and refuse to wash him, he suffocates on his own fumes and dies. The end. Our next book deals with sentient lawn gnomes taking revenge by smashing garden stuff. When confronted, they claim to be slaves trying to liberate their fellow gnomes, but turns out this is all a ruse in order to lure humans into an ambush. But turns out gnomes have sensitive hearing, and if they hear a dog whistle, they'll freeze in place forever. Unfortunately, it's not known if gorilla statues have the same weakness. After this, Goosebumps went on another hiatus of usable monsters, thankfully shorter this time. A Shocker on Shock Street deals with two kids at a movie studio that's more real than it seems. But all the monsters in this book are robots, so they don't count. In Haunted Mask 2, we find another haunted mask. This time, it's one that turns you into an old man until you wear a tuxedo. Lame. Then there's the Headless Ghost, but ghosts don't count. Then there's the abominable Snowman at Pasadena, who, despite what the cover and movie would suggest, was actually more of a neutral figure in the books, since, since he really just tries to mind his own business, and at one point he actually helps the main characters not freeze to death. Then there's How I Got My Shrunken Head, but the shrunken head is actually a good artifact. Then there's Night of the Living Dummy 3. A dummy collector finds a dummy named Smiley in the trash, but as you can tell by the cover, this isn't just any dummy, it's... Dang, his name still evades me. I think it was Punchy, Kicky, Pinchy... Oh well, doesn't matter. In this book, the dummy with no name ends up causing trouble and blaming it on children so their parents think they're going insane, before meeting his fate at the hands of a good dummy. Or rather, a bunch of them. Why am I getting deja vu? Bad Hair Day features a magician reveal powers, and Egg Martians from Mars features slimy blob creatures who resemble yolks, but this is yet another example where the monsters aren't actually the bad guys, and the real monster is man. I mean, I guess they do impregnate the main character, but whatever. So, how about a game of tag? Everyone loves tag. Unless you're me and you can only run for like 5 seconds before your legs are sore the rest of the day. But that's a different story. This is a story about a group of weird hairy monsters who spend all day playing a game called Beast from the East, which is basically tag, but with a bunch of crazy rules. So far, so good. Except for the fact that whoever's it by the end of the day gets eaten. Fun! Luckily, this is a novice game, and because the beasts don't have any concept of twins, when they encounter the main characters, who are twins, they think he has cloning powers, which are banned in novice games, and the group is banned. All seems well, until a beast who's on the level of cloning initiates another game with them. After skimming over the return of the haunted camera and the ghost camp, we come to How to Kill a Monster. In this story, the world's greatest grandparents leave their 2 kids alone and tell them not to open a specific door while they're gone. However, while they're away, they open the door, revealing that there's a creature inside described as having fur and a crocodile-like head trapped in the basement, which is now free to hunt down our protagonist. With nowhere to run, the kids are left with only one option. They have to kill it. They try having it fall through some stairs, but that doesn't work. They fill a pie with a bunch of poisons, but that doesn't work either. Eventually, though, the monster finally catches up with the protagonist, and we find out it's allergic to humans, and it dies. So, that's how you kill a swamp monster. Just make sure his family doesn't seek revenge. Skipping over the Angry Viking book, we come to Attack of the Jack-O-Lanterns, a Halloween tale about a group of kids who come across 2 strange kids wearing pumpkin heads with fire breath powers. They tell them they know a neighborhood where they can hit the jackpot with candy, and sure enough, they're right. But, unfortunately, the pumpkin heads refuse to let them stop trick-or-treating. They keep forcing them to continue. Even when the bags are full, the pumpkin heads just force the kids to eat their candy. Eventually, it turns out this was all an elaborate prank set by 2 of the kids, and the pumpkin heads are actually shape-shifting aliens. All's well and good, at least until we find out that the aliens eat people. But hey, they won't eat their friends, so that's good for them. In the Goosebumps world, vampires don't just need to drink blood to survive, they also need a special mist known as vampire breath, as demonstrated by Count Nightwing, a vampire who's been asleep for quite some time. Vampire breath both allows vampires to live as well as restore them to their full power. In addition, it can also send someone back in time. The final of those powers provides the main conflict where Count Nightwing ends up bringing 2 kids with him back to the past while he's looking for his fangs. However, at the end it turns out he's one of the kids' grandfathers and he left his teeth in a glass jar. The ending of the book also introduces a substance called werewolf sweat that turns whoever drinks it into a werewolf. Next we got Calling All Creeps, home of what I personally think is the most unsettling cover of the classic series. It's hard to explain, it's just this one feels the most wrong. Anyways, this book tells the tale of Ricky Beamer, the loser kid at school, who one day decides to take revenge on one of the popular kids by posting signs with her phone number on it saying if you're a creep then to call her. However, this doxing attempt is sabotage after the girl puts his name on the poster instead. Now, if this was real life, this would become an episode of Law & Order, but in this book, it turns out there's actually a race of reptilian aliens known as creeps, who think Ricky is their leader calling for them. Turns out they want to turn everyone on Earth into a creep, so they gave him a mutagenic seeds and a week deadline before they expire. He tries as hard as he can to avoid this, which makes the creeps madder and madder, until another student who finds out gives the creeps a plan to put the seeds in cookies at a bake sale. At first Ricky is against this, but after finding out that all the creeps will see him as a leader, he allows it. So yes, the monsters win in this story. Yetis are often called abominable snowmen, but the book Beware the Snowman deals with a literal abominable snowman. In this frosty tale, a girl moves to a town in the Arctic Circle with her aunt. However, in this town, everyone keeps warning her to watch out for the snowman without explaining what that even means. However, one day in church, it's revealed that a long time ago, a sorceress brought a snowman to life who started going on a rampage, and now the town builds snowmen in hopes that he will be placated. One day, our main character climbs a mountain and finds the lair of the snowman, who claims to be the father of her, and that her aunt is the one who cursed him. However, much like the gnomes, it turns out that he was lying, and the aunt had nothing to do with his curse, and the snowman isn't her father. But it actually was the girl's parents who cursed the snowman, and a poem her mom read to her contains the key to melting the snowman, revealing a monster underneath, who starts to attack before it turns out the other snowmen have been brought to life by her real father, and the good snowmen kill the bad monster snowman. After this, Goosebumps went on another hiatus of viable monsters. How I Learned to Fly features literally no monsters at all. Chicken Chicken is a book we don't talk about. Don't Go to Sleep has a cover that's a complete lie. This book is about a kid who finds a bed that makes him slip into alternate realities and gets chased down by the multiverse police. It has nothing to do with big hairy monsters. Then we have The Blob That Ate Everything. I would talk about this, but it violates my rule of parody monster, since it's pretty clearly a homage to the classic B-movie monster, The Blob, so this one's getting skipped. Curse of Camp Cold Lake is another ghost story. My Best Friend is Invisible doesn't feature any bad monsters, instead featuring an invisible boy, and aliens who aren't even malicious. Deep Trouble 2 features mutant sea creatures, but the bad guys are regular mad scientists. Haunted School features kids who aren't dead or alive, but also not undead, so they also don't count. Werewolf Skin is a bit too similar to the Haunted Mask to justify its own segment. And the events of I Live in Your Basement all turned out to be a dream. So this brings us to our final monster we talk about for this series. It comes from Monster Blood 4, which introduces us to Blue Monster Blood. Blue Monster Blood is distinct from the green variety because while the green kind was a blob that liked to devour things and made you large if you ate it, the Blue Monster Blood is instead a sludge that becomes a blue slug-like creature when it comes out of its can that multiplies whenever exposed to water. So our gaggle of kids from the Monster Blood trilogy have to stop the blob slugs before it's too late. This is often considered the worst Goosebumps book, so what a place to end. You ask me, I think Goosebumps should have had an Avengers Endgame style finale where all the monsters team up to fight all the kids from the books and they get into an epic clash. Now that would have been a good finale. But regardless, thus concludes the original Goosebumps series. This has been quite the ride, and despite there being a lot more monsterless stories than I thought, this was a pretty fun video to make. So thank you all for watching, and if this video does well enough, I'll make a part 2 featuring Series 2000 and give yourself goosebumps. So, have a happy Halloween, and have a scary night. Goodbye! Also, before you say anything, I know his name is Slappy, that was a joke.